you're watching Gearz, brought to you by Holly Performance Products. Fuel your passion. And Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals.
You know, one question that we get a lot is, how do I maintain a vehicle that's been fully restored or built from the ground up? And this is a big issue. So big, in fact, that a lot of people don't want to mess with it. So they just sell the vehicle while it's still in really good shape. That's why you have so many vehicles going to auction these days, because people want to get rid of them when they're like brand new. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you get your vehicle at an auction, or from the local hot rodder, or from your Aunt May or Uncle John, the fact is you're going to have to deal with some maintenance and upkeep. And it doesn't matter if it's a high-end show vehicle, or a nice restoration, or heck, just an old beater. At this point, they all have one thing in common. They're all just old vehicles in need of maintenance. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that. The fact that all these high-dollar fancy parts that you're putting on today will eventually need to be upgraded or restored down the road if you keep the vehicle long enough. So the real question is, what do you keep? What do you change? What do you upgrade? And what is it better to not mess with at all? That's what we're going to look at today. Now, the first thing that you have to decide are what exactly are the boundaries on the vehicle. For example, this looks like it's a very rare, very expensive 68 Z28 Camaro. And if that's the case, you got to be really careful what you take off this thing and what you put on, because part of its value is in its originality. Fortunately, if you look a little closer, you can tell this is not an original Z28. This is a clone. So you have a lot more leeway about what you can put on, what you can take off a vehicle like this. This is why people build clones, so they can modify them the way they want. On the other hand, you have vehicles like Copperhead. Now this represents all the high-end builds and the show vehicles and the race cars that you can buy at auction. Now these usually have a high collector value, and they're usually loaded with all kinds of unique one-off parts that make them more valuable, yeah. So you want to make sure that you don't take any of that stuff off when you're working on them. So we're going to show you how to do that as we do some much needed maintenance on Copperhead to get it ready for the Grand National Roadster Show. Okay, the first thing that you want to start with is the most obvious, and that is general maintenance. I'm talking oil changes, spark plugs, cooling, hoses, that kind of thing. And this is important whether you got the vehicle at an auction, or pulled it out of a barn, or got it from somebody's collection, whatever, because you don't know how long the vehicle's been sitting, and you don't know when the maintenance was last done. So we're going to start by draining the oil and getting that changed. Getting the vehicle up in the air is a plus here, so if you have a lift, now is the time to use it. When it comes to custom vehicles, keep in mind that a simple oil change may not be that simple, because there could be headers, exhaust, wiring, or brackets in the way that might need to be moved. So be ready for some surprises if you're not familiar with the vehicle. Also, make sure you use a high-quality filter and oil that's designed for the specific needs of your engine. Next, we're going to replace these stock spark plugs with a set from E3, because these weren't around when I first built this thing, and that motor is going to love those plugs. The coolant and the power steering hoses are some other areas that you're going to want to check for leaks. Look at that, it looks like we've got some leaks down there on the power steering, so we'll take care of that. Also, you want to check all your clamps and your hoses to make sure there's no leakage there and the hoses are fresh. You want to check your belts. And if your coolant is over 10 years old, it's a good idea to replace that as well. Another area that needs attention is the suspension. And a quick round with a grease gun will put fresh grease in the tie rods, the ball joints, and the A-arms. Okay, that takes care of general maintenance. Now we're going to move on to preventive maintenance, which means we're going to fix all the things that have the potential to kill you. Kind of important. Now, that brings us up to the fuel system. Now, if you'll notice, this carburetor is leaking out of the gaskets, and it's running down the intake manifold, and it's pooling down underneath, creating a potential fire hazard. So, There obviously needs to be a gasket set put in that carburetor. Now that's not a big deal. That happens all the time with older carburetors. A kit's about 40 bucks from Holley, no problem. What is a problem are those braided stainless steel fuel hoses. Now keep in mind, I built this truck back before ethanol was common in gasoline. So even though those fuel lines look really good on the outside, I guarantee the rubber in those lines is deteriorating right now as we speak. So those hoses need to be upgraded with something like this newer SpeedFlex hose, which is compatible with ethanol and all the crazy additives that they're putting in gasoline now. A good rule of thumb is if your vehicle was built before 2005, you probably need to upgrade your fuel lines.
In a world of economic uncertainty, there will always be a need for quality tools and people who can use them. That's why becoming a Cornwell tool dealer is one of the best career moves you can make. With routes available all across the nation, it's a great way to be your own boss, supply high-quality tools to professionals, and make some real money. If you're tired of working for someone else, have the drive to succeed, and want a career that can be successful no matter what happens on Wall Street, there's a Cornwell tool truck with your name on the side.
Hey, we're back and showing you how to walk that fine line between maintenance and modifications on a classic or a collector vehicle. Now, so far, we have upgraded our fuel lines to something more compatible to ethanol fuels. Now we're going to deal with that carburetor. Now, it would make perfect sense at this point to take that carburetor off and put on some sort of nice fuel injection like a Terminator or a Sniper from Holley. Now, those are great units, but the question is, should you? Well, if your vehicle's a daily driver or it's a clone, sure, there's no problem there. But keep in mind, this is the very first 572 crate engine that Chevy let out the door, and it came with that Demon Racing carburetor on it. And to take that off might mess with the collectability of the truck a little bit. And it might create some clearance issues with this very unique air cleaner. And the current owner does not want to do that. Also, it starts and runs so well with the carburetor, there's really no reason to put fuel injection on it. So for now, we're going to keep the carburetor. Another major safety issue for older vehicles is tires. And you can't use the mileage or how good they look as a gauge, because most tires will time out in 5 to 7 years. Meaning, if your tires are older than that, they need to be replaced because the rubber starts to deteriorate. For example, these tires only have 2,500 miles on them. And as you can see, the tread, man, it looks like brand new. So these are great, right? Wrong. According to the date code, these were built in 2001, so they're over 20 years old. So yeah, time to replace them if you're going to drive the vehicle. The next stop is underneath the vehicle, and obviously you're looking for rust, or damage, or leaks. And see, we got some corrosion here. Yeah, look at that. We have a leak in that brake line. That's got to be fixed. Now, hopefully, as I'm going through this truck, you're starting to realize just how important keeping records are. That's why I wrote the project planning book, because this allows you to go back and reference whatever parts were used when the vehicle was built. And you can update this if you change anything. For example, these brake lines are stainless steel, so they require a 37-degree single flare and these special AN fittings. And we got those from Pure Choice Motorsports. How do we know this? It's in the book. Why is this important? Because now we know where to go to get the parts to fix it. Having this kind of stuff written down will allow whoever is working on the vehicle to find the parts in just a few minutes and get the replacements. This is huge if you didn't build the vehicle or if some time has gone by since you worked on it. Okay, moving on to the body, the old truck has held up pretty well. As you can see, the front bumper has been pushed on a few times, so it's a little crooked, so we'll probably end up replacing that. And some of the taillight lenses are cracked, so obviously those need to be replaced. So a quick call to LMC Truck got us all the replacement parts that we're going to need. And the good news is the replacement parts today are so much better quality than what we had almost 20 years ago. For example, this is the best bumper you could get back then. But if you look at it closely, man, you can see it's wavy and it has unfinished edges. These new bumpers, man, the edges are just smooth as can be. They're super straight and the chrome plating is awesome. Now, when you start hunting for aftermarket bumpers, you're going to find you have some choices. For example, this is an aftermarket bumper for a C10, but as you can see, it has running lights in the bumper. Now that's cool, it looks awesome, but does it go on this truck? Remember, I built this truck to have kind of an original look to it. So adding lights down here or maybe a Euro-style headlight is going to completely change the look of the front of this and possibly the value. So we're going to stay away from that bumper. We're going to keep the original look on here. So the question becomes, do you upgrade a vehicle ever? Well, of course you do. Prime example, remember the broken taillight lenses? Well, here's a couple of replacement taillight lenses. But here is also a replacement taillight lens that's got an LED pattern already in there. Now, as you can see, they look exactly the same. But this one is going to be so much brighter. You're going to want that on your truck so people can see you. Okay, that lays out the parts. Time to get to work. The best part about this kind of maintenance and upgrades is that they're pretty much just direct replacements. So it's quick and easy work and generally not loaded with too many surprises. And the final result is definitely worth the effort.
Redesigned from the ground up, MSD's Ultra 6A boasts a significant size reduction, making it 60% smaller, 50% lighter, and 35% more efficient. Find out about MSD's latest products at Holley.com.
Hey, welcome back to Gearz, where we are in the process of prepping up Copperhead to get ready for the Grand National Roadster Show in Pomona, California. Now, so far we've covered general maintenance and preventive maintenance that you would do on a classic or collector vehicle. Now we're moving on to repairs you have to make, and that brings us up to the bed wood. And as you can see, it hasn't aged well, but there is a reason for that. This is one of the very first bedwood kits that Bedwood & Parts put together back in the day. And even though the wood is great and exotic, the finish was the typical hardware store stuff that was out at the time. And as you can see, those finishes are prone to bubbling and cracking over time if they're subject to humidity or weather. Fortunately, Bedwood has gone on to become one of the top bedwood companies in the industry. Not only offering precision kits in all kinds of exotic wood, but also in developing their own line of sealers that are guaranteed not to bubble or crack out in the weather like the hardware store stuff did. The kits also come ready to install with everything pre-cut and drilled and sealed. The wood that we're using this time is called sapple wood, which is a ribbon grain mahogany, and it features a cool long grain pattern. Then we topped it with their new satin sealer to protect it and bring out the grain even more. This combination is going to look really good against that copper orange paint. Now, to install new bedwood is pretty simple. The only thing that will have to come out is the fuel tank if you've relocated it under the bed to get it out of the cab. Now, having the fuel tank out of the way will give us access to the bolts for the bed strips. Now, one thing to be aware of when you are replacing your bedwood. Even though these kits are designed to fit your bed perfectly, There's no two beds exactly the same, especially if you've added some aftermarket panels. So don't be surprised if you need to do some tweaking, maybe square up the bed a little bit, maybe tweak on the panels or the strips to get everything to fit just right. Obviously, the more time you spend here, the better everything's going to look. Now, to replace the planks, the best way to do it is remove a center one like we've done here, and then remove the panels over to one side and put in the new planks starting at the bed side and working into the center. Then do the same thing on the other side and work your way into the center. That way you can set your gaps as you go, and then when you put in that last plank in the center, everything should line up perfectly. If you do that, it's going to be awesome. And that's it. With a little bit of maintenance and some repairs and updates, your classic or collector car will be ready to go out and stretch its legs. And do what it does best. And since we're going to be replacing those tires soon, we might as well get them good and hot one last time. You know, one of the first true freedoms you experience as a kid is that first bicycle. Man, it becomes your transportation to the world, or at least the local neighborhood. And in my neighborhood, man, we all had bikes. And we'd stick playing cards in the spokes, and we'd suck on black licorice, make it look like we were big biker dudes. And it was magic. But a bike wasn't just about transportation. No, it became an extension of your personality. And there were all kinds of bikes out there. There were 10 speeds, there were mountain bikes, there were Stingrays, there were BMX bikes, and they all had their strengths and weaknesses. And that's where the idea for the story of the purple bicycle came from. Because just like a bike might wish it had the talents or skills of another bike, so do we sometimes overlook our God-given talents and wish we had somebody else's talents, skills, because they seem to be better than ours. It's a simple lesson, but something we all need to be reminded of from time to time.
And now, Seal Tech, brought to you by Steel Rubber Products, helping restore the car of your dreams.
When it comes to looking at an older vehicle to buy or restore, it's pretty common to find that the doors and the trunk lid and the hood don't fit very well. So most people figure they're going to have to spend some time readjusting the hinges and the latch to line everything back up. But before you spend time doing all that, there might be a simpler solution: weather stripping. Let's take a look. On virtually all cars and trucks, any moving panels are designed to ride on a cushion of rubber when they're closed. This not only creates a watertight seal, but it also provides a consistent gap that can then be adjusted by the latches and hinges. Now, if that rubber is hard or squashed flat or missing completely, it will affect the gaps, and all of a sudden, you're going to have a door that's not going to line up anymore. And the culprit is the old weather stripping. If you grab a panel and you can move it back and forth while it's latched, your weather stripping is not doing its job and needs to be replaced. Now, when it comes to the hood, the approach is a little different because they don't have a rubber seal that goes all around the perimeter, but they still use rubber to prevent movement and to make adjustments. Now, up here in front, you can see that they usually have an adjustable rubber bumper to set the height and the gaps. If any of these are broken or worn out or gone, your hood or trunk lid is not going to fit properly. And on some older vehicles, sometimes that hood weather strip is nothing more than a strip of rubber to prevent metal-to-metal contact. So it's pretty important. So the next time you're getting ready to dig into some hinges or some latches to try to get a panel to fit, stop. Check your weather stripping. Chances are That's where the problem is.
What are you working on? Brought to you by Woodward Fabrication, selling quality metalworking equipment since 1966.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Chad, and Chad has a 1968 Oldsmobile Cutlass that he's working on. Now, he got this car back in 2003, and his idea was to build his dream project, which was a streetable tribute version of the prototype 68 Hearst Olds car, which is a great car. It's a great thing to do a tribute out of. Now, he said this car was in pretty rough shape. The motor was gone, transmission was gone, and basically all the front sheet metal was gone. But he said it was a rust-free Florida car, had a clean title, solid frame, and a 12-bolt Chevy rear end. So he was off and building. So he said for the next 5 years, he built or rebuilt the entire car with the help of his wife and his father, who was a GM master technician and a high school shop teacher. Man, that was convenient. You had access to a lot of tools, didn't you? Yeah, smart guy, smart guy. He said the motor, of course, had to be a 455 Olds engine, and they loaded it with forged pistons, competition cam, Edelbrock torquer intake, Holley double pumper, hooker headers, Flowmaster exhaust, a lot of good parts going on this thing. Like any real hot rodder, he had to get that automatic out of there, and he put a stick in it, which is great. A Muncie M21 4-speed. Then, of course, the suspension was rebuilt. He got rid of those stock brakes in the front, put some nice disc brakes on it. And then, for paint, he went to Mako. And as you can see, they did a great job on it. Now, he said the car has been used in cruise nights and an occasional run down the drag strip, which was his original plan. And his best time is 12.8 at 106 miles an hour. That is cooking for that big heavy car, especially on pump gas with cast iron heads. That's nice. He said he'd like to thank his wife and his father for helping him out. So to recognize such a great project, we hooked up with our buddies at Woodward Fab. We're going to give you one of these super bead rollers. Now, this is a bead roller that actually mounts in a vise or on a stand. You get a whole bunch of dies so you can shape metal when you need to. Then we're going to set you up with a deluxe project planning book so you can keep track of everything that you've done on that car. Then, obviously, you're a real gearhead. We're going to give you a Gearz t-shirt. We're also going to give you a gift card from Holley so you can pick up some Holley products to go on that car. And then we're going to finish it off with a stunt double die cast. Now, for the rest of you guys, if you want to get in on this and get your project featured on the show, you got to send it to us. Go to our website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit it into What Are You Working On? The website's also the place to find out more information on any products you may have seen on the show, any Gearz merchandise, and how to join Gearz Nation. You can also see Gearz episodes for free on our YouTube channel and become a channel member. That way you get bonus content and you get early access to all the new episodes. Also, don't forget to check us out on Amazon Prime for Gearz and the Gearz Restoration Series. Finally, don't forget to like us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you're a radio person, make sure you check out our podcast, Tales of a Gearhead. All right, that wraps it up for us today. Hopefully, you have a project waiting for you out in the garage. If you don't, now's the perfect time to go get one. We'll see you next time.